It was supposed to be a routine arraignment. Nothing more than a brief stop in courtroom 3 before heading back to my office. I wasn't even in uniform, just a plain black blazer over a turtleneck and slacks. I came to support a colleague from another department, seated quietly in the back row. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with low murmurs. A deputy I didn't recognize stood by the side entrance, scanning the crowd like a watchdog on edge. I noticed his stare land on me for a moment too long. His brow furrowed. I looked away. A minute later, as the judge called the next case, I leaned toward my colleague to whisper something, when I felt a sudden grip on my arm. "Ma'am, I need you to step outside with me. Now." Startled, I turned to face him. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You're interfering with proceedings." I blinked. "I'm sitting quietly." The deputy didn't budge. His grip tightened. Murmurs rose in the courtroom. I could feel eyes turning toward us. "I'm going to have to escort you out," he said, already trying to pull me up. That's when I sighed, reached slowly into my inside blazer pocket, and flipped open the leather wallet. The silver badge caught the light. The entire room fell into an eerie silence, like the oxygen had been sucked out of the air. The deputy's hand was still on my arm, but his grip slackened the moment his eyes locked on the badge. He stared, mouth slightly open, trying to piece together what he was seeing. "Sheriff's Department," I said calmly, holding the badge steady in front of him. "And unless this courtroom has changed jurisdiction in the last 10 minutes, you just put your hands on the wrong person." The judge leaned forward, squinting toward the commotion. "Is there a problem in the gallery?" The deputy pulled his hand away like he'd touched fire. I didn't know, she wasn't in uniform. I don't need a uniform to be sworn," I cut in, keeping my voice low and even. "I'm here on official observation. If I were here in a civilian capacity, you'd still owe me an explanation before dragging me out." Someone coughed near the back of the courtroom. The clerk froze mid-typing. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably at the front. "I need to speak to your supervisor," I added. The deputy looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The judge gave a measured look over the rim of his glasses. "Deputy Willis, step into chambers. Now." Willis stiffened, gave me one last glance, and hurried through the side door. I slowly slid the badge back into my blazer and took my seat again. No one said a word. But the tone of the courtroom had completely changed. As soon as I sat back down, I could feel the ripple moving through the courtroom like a wave. Heads leaned toward one another. People whispered behind hands. Whatever case had just been called was suddenly irrelevant. Every pair of eyes was still on me. Even my colleague looked stunned. "You didn't mention you were with the sheriff's department," she whispered. "I wasn't planning to," I replied. "I came here to support you. Not make a scene." From the corner of my eye, I caught the bailiff subtly motioning to a second deputy near the exit. Reinforcements, maybe. Or maybe just a quiet attempt at damage control. Either way, I wasn't moving. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. The judge cleared his throat and looked over the room. "Let's continue," he said with a forced calm. "We'll address any further procedural concerns after today's docket." That was code 4, we'll pretend that didn't happen until someone from higher up asks why it did. I watched as the next defendant approached the podium, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was already shifting into a different gear, professional, analytical. If a uniformed officer could grab a credentialed sheriff without pause, in open court no less, who else was getting treated this way? This wasn't going to be a quiet day anymore. I pulled out my phone and opened the department memo app. Time to file a report. The rest of the hearing blurred into background noise. I kept one eye on the front of the courtroom and one ear tuned to the hallway outside, waiting. 15 minutes later, the side door cracked open. A different officer, a senior lieutenant, by the stripes on his collar, stepped in and walked directly to the judge's bench. They exchanged hushed words, then the judge nodded and looked my way. "Sheriff Harper," he said formally, his tone more respectful than before, "Lieutenant Graves would like a word with you. Privately, if you're willing." I stood, straightened my blazer, and followed Graves through the side door without a word. The hallway was narrow, lined with beige walls and flickering lights. Graves gestured toward a room marked, "Interview Room 2." I stepped inside. He closed the door behind us and gave a tight smile. "Sheriff Harper. I want to personally apologize for Deputy Willis's behavior. It appears he didn't check credentials, didn't communicate with court staff, and acted impulsively." I raised an eyebrow. "That's putting it mildly." Graves sighed. "This isn't how we operate. Not how we should, anyway. I've already initiated a review." I leaned against the table. "Good. Because this isn't just about one deputy with poor judgment. This is about why he felt empowered to act without hesitation, against someone who showed no threat, who was quietly seated, doing nothing wrong. He didn't deny it. Just gave a slow nod. "I'm not here to cause waves," I said, "but I will document everything. Because if this can happen to me, it can happen to anyone," Graves finished for me. "Exactly." Lieutenant Graves sat down across from me, clasping his hands. "Look, I won't make excuses. But we both know some of the unspoken habits that linger in older institutions. Willis is young, hot-headed, but he's also a product of what he sees." I kept my gaze steady. "Then maybe it's time we stop pretending those habits are harmless." Graves didn't argue. "I've got a department to run," I continued. "I don't have time to babysit courtroom protocol. But this? This crossed a line. If that badge had stayed in my pocket another 5 seconds, would I have been in cuffs? Would he have dragged me into the hallway like a threat?" Graves winced. "You're not wrong." I let that hang for a moment. Then I pulled out my ID and placed it on the table beside my badge. "I want it on record that I was there in an official capacity. I want a formal apology in writing from your department. And I want assurance that this won't happen again, to anyone." He nodded slowly. "You'll have it by the end of the day." I picked up my things. "Good. Then I'll consider the matter handled. But if I hear about this kind of behavior again, anywhere near my jurisdiction, I won't be coming in quietly." Graves gave a short, stiff smile. "Understood." I left the room and re-entered the courtroom through the same side door I'd been dragged toward earlier. Funny how fast the tone changed when people realized who you were. As I walked back into the courtroom, the shift in energy was palpable. No one said anything, but the atmosphere had changed. The gallery seemed quieter. The glances were longer. The deputy who had replaced Willis near the entrance stood a little straighter, suddenly more aware of his surroundings, and of me. I didn't sit this time. I walked directly to the bench where my colleague was still seated, her eyes wide. "You okay?" she whispered. "I'm fine," I said. "But someone's going to be writing a lot of internal memos tonight." She smirked nervously, then looked past me toward the front. The judge was watching closely now, expression unreadable. Before I turned to leave, I scanned the room again. Every lawyer, defendant, and officer in that courtroom had just gotten a lesson. Not just about badges. About assumptions. About the danger of acting without information. And about the cost of grabbing the wrong person for the wrong reason. I nodded once toward the judge, then made my way out the main doors. As they shut behind me, I could already hear the hum of whispers starting back up. Let them talk. I had work to do. Back in my vehicle, I took a deep breath and let the silence settle. I wasn't angry, not anymore. What I felt was sharper than anger. Focused. Intentional. I opened my tablet on the passenger seat and began documenting the entire incident, times, names, actions. Not out of spite. Out of duty. This wasn't about pride. It was about precedent. If people in law enforcement were being handled like this without cause, how were civilians being treated? I finished my report, flagged it urgent, and sent it directly to the Internal Oversight Division. Within minutes, I got a ping. Acknowledged. Your statement has been received. Further action pending review. That would start a chain reaction. Willis wouldn't be fired, not immediately. But there would be a mandatory retraining. There would be policy reviews. And more importantly, my name would be flagged in the system as someone who didn't let these things slide. I leaned back and stared through the windshield. The courthouse loomed behind me, still buzzing with the same old cases, same old procedures. But something had shifted. Not just in that building, but in every officer who had witnessed what happened. Even if they didn't say it out loud, even if they never admitted it, they'd remember this. And they'd think twice next time. The next morning, my phone rang before I even made it into the office. Unknown number. Sheriff Harper, I answered. A familiar voice responded. Lieutenant Graves. Just wanted you to know the written apology was filed this morning. You'll receive a formal copy via email and mail. Good, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I assume Deputy Willis has been debriefed? He has. Let's just say he had a long night of reviewing courtroom protocols, and a very uncomfortable meeting with the captain. I let a small silence stretch. He's requested to speak with you directly, Graves added. No need, I said firmly. I'm not looking for apologies in person. I'm looking for change. You've got enough to handle on your end. Just make sure he learns something. Understood, he said. And for what it's worth, a few of my officers were talking about you this morning. They didn't even know you were sheriff. That's part of the problem, I said. They only show respect when the badge is in their face. Not when the person is quietly doing their job. He paused. You're right. We've got work to do. I hung up. In the hallway leading to my office, I passed two deputies from my own team. They gave me a knowing nod, not the usual casual one. A deliberate, respectful one. Word had spread. The courtroom story was already echoing through departments, whispered over coffee machines and across locker rooms. And sometimes, that was how real change started, not with a speech. Not with a fight. But with a moment someone never expected to go public. By the time I stepped into my office, my assistant had already printed out the formal letter from the courthouse. The header bore the sheriff's insignia, and beneath it, the words, Formal Apology Incident Acknowledgement. I skimmed it quickly. It was carefully worded, too carefully, but it checked every box, acknowledgement of the incident, recognition of my authority, and a commitment to internal review and retraining. Bureaucratic, yes. But concrete. It would live in the file. And that mattered. I filed it away, then called a department-wide meeting. 20 minutes later, the briefing room was full. Deputies, lieutenants, support staff, all of them quiet, waiting. I want to talk about what happened yesterday, I began. Many of you have already heard parts of it. So let me make the facts clear. I laid it out, succinct, professional, without dramatics. A sheriff in plain clothes, seated in the courtroom. Unidentified by appearance. Approached and forcibly removed without cause. The officer didn't ask questions. He didn't check credentials. He acted on instinct, and that instinct was wrong. The room stayed silent. This isn't just about me. This is about anyone. Civilian, officer, judge, or otherwise. When we forget the importance of restraint, of verification, of respect, we lose the trust the public has in us. I let that sit. From this moment forward, anyone representing this department will be expected to demonstrate the standard I held yesterday, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. Understood? A chorus of nods. A few quiet affirmations. Good. They weren't just listening. They were hearing me. Later that evening, I stood alone in the empty briefing room, the chairs still neatly arranged, the lights dimmed to a soft glow. It had been a long day, calls from other agencies, quiet acknowledgments from colleagues I hadn't heard from in months, and one message from a rookie deputy I'd never met: "Thank you for standing your ground." We needed that. It struck me more than the apology letter ever could. What happened in that courtroom wasn't just a mistake, it was a mirror. A moment that exposed how quickly people judged based on surface, how easily respect disappeared when a title wasn't worn on the sleeve. But now, something had shifted. Not everywhere. Not overnight. But enough. Sometimes authority isn't declared, it's revealed. Not in how loud you are, but in how calmly you hold your ground when someone tries to take it from you. That courtroom hadn't seen a badge. But they saw what it meant. And that would be remembered. I stepped out into the quiet hallway, locking the door behind me. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. But tonight, I walked out not just as a sheriff. I walked out as a reminder.